On the 12th of June, there was a major aviation disaster when a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner crashed shortly after takeoff in India. It was on its way to Gatwick, London airport, and a lot of people died in this tremendous tragedy. And this accident has baffled pilots and aviation experts all over the place, because it is inconceivable for a Boeing 787 to lose power like that within a few seconds of takeoff. And we could all see that it lost power. All the engines just died. And there was a lot of speculation, a lot of theories on how this could have happened. Now, the Indian equivalent to the National Transportation Safety Board, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau is what they call themselves. So it's the Ministry of Civil Aviation by the Government of India, under the Government of India. They call themselves the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. They have released a preliminary report. And in this video, I'm going to go over this report for you and show you what it actually says, because there's a lot of wrong information being distributed online. And so we're going to take it step by step, and we are going to take a look at exactly what this report says. And here it is. It is the accident involving Air India's Boeing 787-8 aircraft bearing registration Victor Tango Alpha November Bravo at Ahmedabad on the 12th of June. Government of India, Ministry of Civil Aviation, Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. There's a foreword that I'm not going to read. It's only 15 pages. So we're going to go through this very quickly. There's some general information. Nothing spectacular here. Just some very basic statistics or information about this. There's some background, which I'm also not going to go through. This is more about, who's involved, how information was distributed and so forth. And we're going to get section 3 deals with injuries. So there were the fatalities. There were 12 crew members that died, 229 passengers, and 19 on the ground. And then one person survived with some serious injuries, and there were 67 people with injuries on the ground. And then on the aircraft information, this is a Boeing 787-8. It was manufactured in 2013. It had approximately 41,900 aircraft hours, 41,868 hours. Okay, and then the two engines. The left-hand engine had 28,000 hours approximately. It was manufactured in May 2012, and the right-hand engine had about 33,500 hours roughly, and it was manufactured in January 2013. And so they go through some maintenance, special airworthiness information bulletins, airworthiness directives, and alert service bulletins for the aircraft and its engines. Nothing spectacular there. This all aircraft has these. The report then continues with the site of the accident, of the crash, the devastation, and they document this, where they picked up what about the aircraft, which debris was picked up where. So they mapped this out, and they try to figure out what part of the aircraft hit which building and so forth. Because it hit a medical campus close to the airport. And so they map this out, they number the buildings so that they can tell you what was found. And it's amazing destruction when you look at these pictures. Devastating. So here on page, page 10, we get to some of the things that they found. This picture on the top right with the red part of the fuselage, showing the part of the fuselage, shows an open APU air inlet door. The APU is the auxiliary power unit, and this is an air inlet to provide air for this unit. The APU is a small jet engine, and this runs off of jet fuel. It's a small jet engine that runs off jet fuel, and it provides power to the aircraft when the main engines are turned off. However, it doesn't respond immediately. So in other words, if you lose sudden power, this is going to take a while to start up. I believe it starts with batteries, with a starter motor that starts the engine turning, and then it starts running. And it provides electric power as well as some hydraulic functions when the aircraft when the main engines are not working to generate electricity and hydraulic power. When you are at an airport and you see Boeings and airplanes sitting outside the terminal, you'll often hear this whining sound, these whining jet engines running while the main engines are turned off. And this is what you're often hearing. These APUs are running, providing power to the aircraft, inside the cabin and to the cockpit and all the electrical systems and so forth, operating some doors and some hydraulics and things. When the airplane is just sitting on the tarmac, engines are off, but it still needs power to do all these other things. The next picture here, starting from the left, is the flap handle lever. And they say that it was found in the 5-degree position for flaps, which is consistent with takeoff flap position or setting. And then the two pictures on the right, the one in the middle is the thrust lever quadrant that they've discovered. The picture on the right is just this is the gear lever, landing gear lever module that they found. And the picture on the right is just a picture of what it looks like when it's healthy. And the gear lever was in the down position or in the landing gear extended position. Next we get to the thrust lever quadrant. The picture on the left is the one that recovered. The picture on the right is a healthy one, just to show what it should look like if it's not burnt. One thing that's peculiar here is that they discovered that the thrust lever was in the idle position. However, they note that according to the flight recorded data, the thrust lever was in the takeoff position. So how it got into the idle position, we don't know. Maybe it was part of the impact. And the reverser levers were in the stowed position. So everything was heavily damaged. Then they get to the personnel information. These are the two pilots, the pilot and co-pilot. The captain was a 56-year-old male. The co-pilot was a 32-year-old male. Let's look at the captain. He was an ATPL license holder. License was valid and unexpired. He had a pilot in command rating for several aircraft, including Cessnas and in the A310, the Boeing 787 and the Boeing 777. His medical was up to date. And he had 15,638 hours of flying time. And in this type, in the Boeing 787, he had about 86,000 hours of flying time, of which 260 hours was as pilot in command. Okay, the rest of if you take the difference between these two, the difference would be him as co-pilot. The co-pilot, everything is also in order with him. He does not have a license to fly the Boeing 787 as pilot in command. He does have co-pilot rating for the 787 and the A320. He had 3,400 flight hours and 1,128 hours as co-pilot in the Boeing 787. 0 hours as pilot in command, obviously. And then the report conveniently also states how many hours of flights these two gentlemen had in the last 180 days, in the last 30 days, in the last 7 days, and in the last 24 hours. Why is this important? This shows whether they might possibly have had fatigue from flying too much or from flying too many flights consecutively. And these logs indicate that neither of them could have suffered from that kind of fatigue because they hadn't flown in the last 24 hours. And during the past 7 days, they only flew less than 7 hours or less, roughly. It gives some weather information. At the time of the accident, the winds were between 3 and 7 knots at 240, 250 degrees off the runway. It was a runway 23. So it was a headwind, slightly off the center, very convenient conditions, or spectacular conditions for takeoff. This is not a problem. You like a headwind. Headwinds are good on takeoff if they are coming down the runway. The aerodrome. So here's the runway details. It's runway 523. In other words, it's oriented with 230 degrees, roughly magnetic. It's 3,505 meters long, 45 meters wide. It's more than enough room for this aircraft to take off. It's asphalt. And then we get to communications. Nothing spectacular here. It starts with pushback and all the communications with ground and with the tower until it gets cleared for takeoff from runway 23. The winds are 240 and 6 knots reported to the aircraft at the time. And then at 8:09:05, a mayday call was made by the airplane. Okay, the next section is the one that we're going to spend most time with, and this deals with the 2 flight recorders. So this aircraft is equipped with 2 flight recorders. They call them EAFRs, or Enhanced Airborne Flight Recorders. The 2 EAFRs, or 2 flight recorders, are identical. And one is in the tail section, one is in the forward section. Another thing that we should take note of is that each flight recorder records both digital flight information, all the flight systems. It collects data from the sensors and from the systems and from the instrument panel and everywhere, whatever it can collect, and as well as voice recordings from the microphone in the cockpit. So each of these flight recorders record both digital data and voice recordings. But just there are duplicates. One is in the aft, one is in the front. What else is different between them? The one in the aft section of the airplane receives electric power from the main aircraft electric systems. The forward system has an additional power source. In the event that the aircraft power or electricity is lost, this recorder has a battery and a power supply that will provide it with power even if all of the aircraft systems fail and it doesn't have power from anywhere else. So this one is the one that is most survivable and most reliable for recording information in the event of a power failure. It says that this allows the forward flight recorder to continue to record available digital flight data and voice data from the cockpit area microphone, or CAM, even after the power is lost to other aircraft systems. And here you can see what they look like. The one on the left is the aft recorder. It was heavily damaged. And the one on the right is burnt, but it's still a box. You can still see some connectors and see things here to attached to it, so it is less damaged. They also indicate where they found these and when they found these 2 flight recorders. The aft one was found on the top of building A, which they mapped earlier in the report, on the 13th of June. It was heavily damaged. And the forward flight recorder was recovered on the 16th of June, and besides building F. It was burnt and covered in soot. It was still attached to equipment shelf, Some of the connectors, the connector was melted but still connected. And they also recovered the lithium battery and so forth. So this was in decent condition for this kind of crash. They then started analyzing, transported them to their facility to start recovering data. They attempted to recover data from the forward flight recorder in the lab on the 24th of June, and they found it to be in good condition. So the downloaded flight data from the forward flight recorder contained 49 hours of digital flight data and 6 flights, including the last flight. And the audio, it contained 2 hours of, and captured also the last flight's cockpit audio. So good news, right? The forward flight recorder worked. Bad news, the aft flight recorder was substantially damaged. They tried to open it, look at the memory card, nothing, they couldn't recover. The damage was too extensive. But the forward flight recorder, that one they recovered a bunch of information from. And so now we get to the accident flight. This airplane arrived from Delhi at the airport earlier that morning at 5:47, and it was parked in Bay 34. Now the previous flight's crew filled out a report, a pilot defect report. If they discover something is not working, or there's something, a light is out, or something is not, a gauge doesn't work, they file a report like this, and its message that they reported, the status message is STAB POS XDCR, whatever that means, in the tech log. There was then the mechanics then did some troubleshooting, and then the aircraft was again released for flight at 6:40. So this was apparently a small thing to repair. And then it was scheduled for the next flight to Gatwick, London. Fuel. It carried 54,200 kilograms of fuel, and the takeoff weight was all within limits. There were no dangerous goods on the airplane, so everything was normal. They give the calculated V speeds for the available conditions. So for takeoff, V1 is 153 knots, VR is 155 knots, and V2 is 162 knots. They then did a SMGCS replay of the flight. I assume what this means is that they gather the data, and then based on the meteorological conditions and the exact data that they have from the flight recorder of all the instrumentation and the controls, they can then run a simulation. And the aircraft was observed departing from the Bay 34 at 7:48. It was issued takeoff clearance at 8:07:33. It started rolling at 8:07:37. And now it goes through all these transition speeds, V1, VR, V2. The aircraft lifted off at 8:08:39. So let's just take that. 8:08:39 is liftoff. It's when the wheels leave the runway. And 3 seconds later, 3 seconds later, at 8:08:42, it reaches the maximum speed in this flight, 180 knots, and then starts losing speed and altitude. Now, all these times that I'm giving you are in UTC, in standard time. But here is the crux. Here is the main point of the article. The crucial part of this report is why did it not continue increasing speed? Because 180 knots is slow for a Boeing like this. They say that its maximum recorded airspeed is 180 knots. Why? It should continue climbing, right? Why? But at that time, the flight recorder recorded an additional crucial piece of information. And that is that engine 1 and engine 2's fuel was cut off. Those two switches were cut off. Now let's go back to these pictures of the thrust lever quadrant. If you look here in the picture on the right, you see the two thrust levers, these two big white handles. And then below them you see these red switches. Well, if you pan to the right, below the levers, you see these two black knobs. These are the fuel cut-off switches. They control valves that turn off fuel or turn on fuel to the two engines left and right, or 1 and 2. And they operate, it's a spring action where you pull the switch, move it, and then push it in again. And that engages or disengages the flow of fuel to an engine. So at 8:00, let's see, at 8:08:42 and 43, the two engines' fuel was cut off. 1 second apart. Boom, boom. Both cut-off switches were disengaged. And fuel was cut off from the engine. So the engines were immediately starving of fuel. These are jet engines. They need a lot of fuel. So they were transitioned from the run to the cut-off position, one after the other, with a time gap of 1 second. And both engines started unwinding, right? Losing thrust and losing power and losing speed. And then there's a voice recording at this time. The cockpit voice recording is that one of the pilots is heard asking the other, why did he cut off? The other pilot responds that he did not do so. They don't say which pilot is which. They just say, one pilot asks the other one, why did you cut off? And the other one states, I did not do it. Then the report interjects or interrupts itself here with a picture of this airport CCTV footage, showing a frame that shows that the rat is extended. The rat is the ram air turbine. That is a little propeller, like a windmill, that function is to generate electricity. It's a little electric generator connected to a propeller. And when this thing starts spinning, it generates electricity just to keep crucial electric systems running. It cannot power the entire airplane, but it can keep crucial systems running. And it can eventually also power some crucial hydraulic systems. Okay? So it shows in this frame, captured by the airport cameras, that the rat is extended. And it shows that it gets deployed. Remember, the APU, the auxiliary power unit, is too slow. It takes a while to start up, right? It needs battery, and it needs to start winding up. It's too late by the time that thing starts. It says that there were no significant bird activity observed in this vicinity of the flight path, and the aircraft started to lose altitude before it reached the perimeter of the airport. Everything happened so quickly. And both engines winded down below minimum idle speed within seconds. And the rat started producing power for the hydraulic systems, or crucial hydraulic systems, at about 8 or 8:47. Remember, this is 5 seconds after the two switches. 5 and 4 seconds after switch 1 and switch 2 were turned off. 5 seconds. The engines are wound down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Engines stops, basically stopping. And there no more power, no more electric power, no more hydraulic power. So now all the auxiliary systems stop kicking in, and the rat is the first one. It's immediate. It comes out, starts producing electric power. And then 10 seconds after they were turned off, the flight recorder records those switches being turned back on again. Fuel is being passed to the engines again. 10 seconds. So at 8:08:52. And these switches are turned to on with 4 seconds apart. So at 8:08:52 and 8:08:56 is for engine 2. In between, the APU inlet door opens. So now the APU starts kicking in, okay, at that time. But this is seconds. The airplane isn't in the air for a minute yet. It left the wheels left the runway at 8:08:39. We are now at 8:08:52. No time. This is 13 seconds later. The report states here a sentence which says a lot of things. It says that when field control switches are moved from cutoff to run while the aircraft is in flight, each engine's full authority dual engine control, or FADEC, that's a system, automatically manages a relight and thrust recovery sequence of ignition and fuel introduction. So the whole engine is starting up now. Those two engines, each engine is trying to start up now. The EGT, or this is, I believe, the exhaust gauge temperature, was observed to be rising for both engines, indicating a relight. Engine 1's core deceleration stopped, reversed, and started to progress to recovery. Engine 2 was able to relight, but could not arrest core speed deceleration and reintroduced fuel repeatedly to increase core speed acceleration and recovery. So engine 1 was starting to recover, engine 2 could not recover. It lit up and it was starting to, but it couldn't start, it couldn't increase speed. And the flight recorder recording stopped at 8:09:11. That should be around about the crash is 8:09:11. That should be roughly when, this flight recorder stopped working, right? And that is 32 seconds after the wheels left the runway. 32 seconds. And it is 27 seconds after the fuel cutoff switches were disengaged. At 8:09:05, so 6 seconds prior to the flight recorder stopping any kind of recording, one of the pilots transmitted "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday." The air traffic controller requested their call sign because they just heard "Mayday, Mayday," they didn't know who it was. They didn't get any response, but then they saw the ball of fire. And then, all the ambulances and fire trucks and everything was sent off the airport property to the location of the crash site. So that ends that section. And then the report concludes with progress of the investigation, where they're simply saying that they're continuing, they're still collecting information and details, they're still analyzing, this is a preliminary report and so forth. Investigation continues. But this is very significant. This is very significant that these two switches, the fuel cut-off switches, fuel cut-off to engine 1 and engine 2, were engaged or disengaged. Fuel was basically turned off for these two engines. 3 seconds after takeoff. 3 seconds later, they were turned off. And so immediately these engines started losing power. And then there's a 10-second gap before the first switch is turned back on. And for engine number 2, there's a 14-second gap. So engine number 2 did not have time to wind up again. Engine 1 winded up again. But not enough to lift this airplane back into the air and prevent the crash. I mean, this was a few seconds could have made all the difference. A few seconds here or there could have saved all these people. Now, there's a lot of speculation online now of why did this one of the 2 pilots turn off the fuel. And I've heard people say this is the captain. I've heard them say that he was deliberately flew the plane into the ground to kill all those people. It was a murder-suicide. Now, I believe this is speculation. I believe this is pure speculation. I don't think the report says that. I don't think we can really glean that from the report. This is obviously a possibility, but I wouldn't say that's 100% what's happened here. And I think there are other possibilities. One of the problems with that theory is that look at how this plane goes down. So you can see, if we look at the video, and I'm going to play the video for you in just a second. Let's take a look. Look at this airplane. Look at how it's lifting off. You can see it's lifting off, and it starts losing altitude, right? But it's not pointing its nose at the ground to fly into the ground. No, this airplane is now trying to recover. It's in an attitude to recover. It's not like this pilot is trying to push the airplane back into the ground, which is what I would say. And at this point, it has hydraulic power back. It has hydraulic power. It lost hydraulic power, so there is probably a case to be made that once you turn off once you lose power, you don't have hydraulics anymore to maneuver the airplane or change its attitude. However, I believe at that point the airplane had power, and you could have done that. But to glide slowly into the ground doesn't seem like a suicide. It doesn't seem like an angry suicide to me. So if I had to, I would not put that at the highest top, my top guess as to what happened. I don't believe this is a murder-suicide. I think it's a possibility, but I would not give it a very high probability. What else could have possibly happened here? Well, perhaps, who knows? Perhaps one of the pilots was confused. Perhaps he was not thinking straight. Perhaps he was tired of something, not of flying, but of something else. It certainly, if the switches were changed and fuel was cut off, then that is certainly pilot error. Not denying that. But was it a deliberate murder, homicide, mass homicide here? I don't believe so. But it's possible. But what if the co-pilot or the co-pilot was looking at checklists, and maybe what stupid thing happened? Maybe he dropped the checklist. There's a folder, right? Maybe he dropped it, picked it up again, had it open on the wrong page, and he's looking at numbers 14 is the next step in takeoff, and he reads number 14 and he does it without thinking. And what's number 14? It's turn off fuel, when you turn the airplane, when you park the airplane, or something like that. He's not on the right page in his folder. I don't know. I mean, I'm making up stuff here, but just to give you an example, that perhaps, well, you know, maybe he drank too much the previous night. I don't know. That's criminal anyway. But it is horrible to think that somebody would kill so many people and take an airplane down deliberately. It's too early to reach any kind of conclusions. It's really too early to speculate about what happened. We should really wait for the final report to come out and figure to see what they all say, with and to have all the data in front of us before coming up with any. Because I'm sure there's going to be an investigation into both these pilots and, you know, their state of mind before this flight. If one of them was planning to commit suicide, there must be some evidence of that. There must be someone would have noticed something, right? A neighbor or a loved one or somebody would have noticed something. So hopefully we'll get to the truth. But at this point, it's too early. It's just fascinating information right now. Now we know why this airplane lost power. It was clear from the evidence, clear from the videos that this airplane lost power. Nobody knew why. Now we know why. Anyway, that's the report. Thanks for watching. See you next time. We'll keep our eyes peeled for the final report, and we'll release that too. Thanks for watching.